Danger Dolan.
From leeches on your privates to holes in your skulls to releasing demons, we count 12 of the worst doctor cures throughout history. Number 12, bloodletting and leeches. Bloodletting was a common medical procedure prior to the 19th century. It involved flushing out bad humors, which are black and yellow bile, blood and phlegm. In the Middle Ages, you could get this done by your local barber or surgeon right after a haircut and some light dentistry work. Several bloodletting methods involve drawing blood from veins and arteries using barbaric tools, but leeches were the most popular method. The French were particularly mad for this. During the 1800s, they went through 40 million leeches a year. They attached them to patients' arms, legs, torso, and other more sensitive areas. Leeches would then be tied to a silk thread, lowered down a person's throat, and reeled in like a fish. They were also applied to women's vaginas to relieve uterine disease, sexual excitement, and general hysteria. British gentlemen also had their wives leeched every 2 weeks. Sometimes leeches wound up lost inside female patients, which certainly didn't help with the old hysteria. However, doctors in these cases didn't sweat it because they were sure the leech would find its way out eventually. That's some pretty scary stuff, if you ask me. Number 11, mercury poisoning. The silvery liquid mercury was once used to treat everything from scraped knees to constipation, had side effects that were indistinguishable from the symptoms of syphilis, which it was commonly used to treat. We now know it's extremely toxic and that mercury poisoning comes with a laundry list of symptoms. These can include chest pains, heart and lung problems, tremors, muscle spasms, psychotic reactions like delirium, hallucinations, and suicidal tendencies. This is starting to sound a lot like those WebMD symptoms where you think you have everything and you really just don't. You probably just have a headache. Number 10, trepanation. Trepanation is a treatment for mental illness that began 7,000 years ago. It involved making a hole in the skull using an auger, bore, or saw to relieve headaches, mental illness, or even demonic possession. With no knowledge of brain chemistry, ancient doctors believed that the mentally ill had literal demons living inside their heads, so holes were drilled into patients' skull to allow these spirits to escape. The horrifying thing is that anesthetics weren't used in a lot of these cases. The practice still goes on today for a small number of strange and misguided folks. These days, a single small hole is sometimes made in the skull to treat brain hemorrhaging after severe head trauma. Number 9, impotence shock therapy. Impotence is one of the most embarrassing problems a man can face. Throughout history, men with uncooperative little guys have searched desperately for something that can cure their bedroom woes. With the late 19th century invention of electricity, men and their frustrated wives hoped the new technology could take them straight to Boner Town. Doctors devised a range of devices and products designed to get penises to stand to attention. These included electrified beds and complicated cock-shocking electric belts. Ooh-wee. Other strange treatments for erectile dysfunction had included testicle implants, radium suppositories, ingesting Spanish flies, drinking frog juice, and stimulating blood flow with wasp stings and spider venom. Number 8, female hysteria treatments. According to 19th century doctors, female moodiness is a symptom of a very serious medical condition called female hysteria. Any woman who displayed symptoms like nervousness, chattiness, unwillingness to talk, irritability, or disobedience towards the supreme overlord Victorian husbands was ordered to have doctor-administered vaginal massage until their hysteria subsided. This is really starting to sound as if molestation was common practice in the 19th century. The list of symptoms for female hysteria was so long that literally any ailment could fit its diagnosis. Doctors eventually invented the vibrator to alleviate hand strain. Convenient. Very convenient. Number 7, pain and rotational therapies. As a treasurer of the Mint, signer of the Declaration of Independence, and author of various medical textbooks, Benjamin Rush was America's most beloved, trusted doctor. His biggest contribution was in the area of psychiatry. Rush believed pain and suffering had curative powers, so patients paid him actual money to beat, starve, and verbally abuse them. All in the name of science, though. That dude is crazy. His torturous practice also included pouring acid on their backs, cutting them with knives, and keeping wounds open for months or even years to encourage permanent discharge from the brain. Rush also believed mental illness was caused by poor circulation to the brain, so he devised something called rotational therapy, where patients were twirled from ropes while being suspended from the ceiling for hours at a time. Yo, he was crazy. He was one sick, creative, crazy bastard. Number 6, cocaine cures. Cocaine is a symbol of the 80s in excess, but it may surprise you to learn that it was originally used medicinally. In 1884, Austrian ophthalmologist Karl Kohler somehow discovered that placing cocaine on a patient's cornea temporarily desensitized the eye to pain. making eye surgery less risky. When word of his discovery spread, doctors realized that cocaine could be used as an anesthetic for all kinds of procedures. Skepticism was involved concerning about the drug's addictiveness, but doctors scoffed, claiming it was no more addictive than tea or coffee. It's crazy. By 1900, Americans could walk into any pharmacy and purchase a gram of pure cocaine for 25 cents. The drug was mixed into everything from wines to soft drinks to cigars. Companies offered hypodermic needle kits so patients could inject themselves from the comfort of their own homes. So you could take it on the go. Take it on the go. Cocaine on the go. Cocaine was additionally prescribed for hemorrhoids, indigestion, appetite suppression, fatigue, shyness, and toothaches. Even kids got in the craze until by 1902, upwards of 200,000 Americans were addicted. The addiction became an epidemic, and state and local governments were forced to intervene. Good times, y'all. Good times. Number 5, urine therapy. Forget rest, nutrition, and exercise. An alarming number of cultures and people throughout history believed wallowing in urine was the key to good health. Urine therapy was said to cure an extensive list of ailments and promote good health if drank, applied to the skin, or used to give a nice bracing urine enema. Nasty. The sad part is that even though all of these purported benefits have been disproved, urine therapy is still practiced today. Even peeing on a jellyfish's sting has no scientific benefit. So, it's either the toilet or you're going to run to the bushes and you got to do it that way. But, don't do it on that jellyfish thing. That don't make no sense. Number 4, insulin-Coma therapy. Insulin-Coma therapy came about entirely by accident when a Viennese doctor named Manfred Sakel accidentally overdosed a patient on insulin overdose in 1927. The patient, who was a morphine addict, fell into a deep coma and awoke to discover that her addiction and probably 8% of her brain capacity had disappeared. Sakel tried this again on another unsuspecting patient and found similar results. He was soon inducing insulin comas to schizophrenics and other patients. Some claimed to be cured of their afflictions, but that was probably just the brain damage talking. The dangerous therapy caused several casualties and was finally phased out in the 1960s. Sakel wouldn't have been happy. If you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, right? Breakfast, eggs, brains, get it? Haha. Number 3, hot iron treatment for hemorrhoids. In the Middle Ages, it was not uncommon for disease sufferers to pray to patron saints for divine intervention. During the 7th century, an Irish monk named Saint Fiarce became the patron saint for hemorrhoid sufferers. He developed hemorrhoids from digging in his garden, but was one day cured after accidentally sitting on a pointy stone. The stone is still around today, and hemorrhoid sufferers visited hoping for a similar cure. News of the miracle traveled until medieval physicians conceived the idea their white-hot cautery irons to treat the problem. Pulling and scratching them out with fingernails was another widely used solution. Eventually, a 12th century Jewish physician named Moses Maimonides wrote about his disapproval of the surgery and instead recommended the sitz bath, which is still the most common treatment for hemorrhoids today. I'm so glad. So glad. Number 2, extreme hot and cold therapies. For centuries, heat has been used to cure mental diseases. In fever therapy, fevers were induced by hot baths, electric heaters, and even deliberate infection with malaria. Before penicillin, it was the most effective way to treat syphilis, but patients had to be closely monitored as it came with a pretty high risk of death. Extreme cold therapy was the inverse therapy and was just as dangerous. Patients receiving this treatment were sometimes refrigerated 3 days at a time at temperatures as low as 20 degrees Fahrenheit, below a normal healthy body temperature. Hydrotherapy was another risky treatment that bears little resemblance to today's relaxing equivalent. Common in the early 20th century, hydrotherapy patients usually suffered mental disorders and were wrapped like mummies in towels that had been soaked in icy water. Other times, they were strapped with restraints in a cold tub for days at a time or sprayed with high-pressured water jets, sometimes while bound in a crucifix position. Dang. Number 1, lobotomy. Finally, we have everybody's favorite mental illness cure, the lobotomy. The lobotomy was developed by Portuguese neurosurgeon Igues Muniz, who was inspired by tales of a violent monkey that had become docile following the removal of its frontal lobe. He theorized the frontal lobe was the source for all mental illness, so he pretty much cut it out of his human patients. The surgeries were a success, relatively speaking, and lobotomies became widespread. Muniz even received the Nobel Prize for his efforts in 1949. Meanwhile, in the US, Dr. Walter Freeman made a lucrative business out of driving around the country in his lobotomobile, providing on-the-spot lobotomies to anyone who wanted them. Sometimes this was schizophrenics, other times just bored housewives. Dr. Freeman's barbaric technique involved inserting an ice pick into the eye socket and swirling it around to disable the frontal lobe. Because his surgical technique was dangerously imprecise and his equipment was unsterile, Freeman was basically a drive-by serial killer. Fortunately, the lobotomy faded into medical obscurity and modern-day brain surgery is a lot safer. So, I guess we can say that he wasn't really trying to keep people free. Okay, that's a bad joke. Let me stop. Lobotomy, y'all. Lobotomies. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Peace.